Hi friends, welcome back to my lockdown diaries. This is Shashwat here. These diaries are repositories of my thoughts and experiences as we live through these quarantine days in India. So yes, yesterday I had spoken about the need and why comics are important, how kids of today are missing upon something very pertinent in their lives. So today I'm gonna take it a bit further and delve a little more, dive a bit deeper and explore the world of comic itself. Talk about some of the fascinating heroes and characters that have defined my generation for that matter, and how I have grown living up with them. So that's what today's lockdown diary would be all about. So let me just give a brief overview of how the comics have evolved over the ages. So first up, I'm not talking about comics per se from a very generic kind of a thing. So there are a lot of comics which have been there: Peanuts, Dilton Dooley, Laurel Hardy, Uncle Scrooge, Disney comics and all that. So I'm not talking about comics which are very catered to kids and all. I'm talking about superheroes. So my focus will be largely on superheroes and the different characters that have emerged over these years and how they have defined our thinking. These superheroes belong to an era much before the Avengers of today, long before you had your Iron Man and Thor and Hawk and all those battery of people that you have. We had our own set of superheroes which were very powerful, pertinent and very amazing in their own sense. So I'll just give a brief overview of all those people that were there. So comics started basically, if you go into the history, Tarzan would be one of the first comic superhero of its type, Edgar Rice Burroughs. The interesting part about Tarzan was also came out in novels and book format, and also came out in a comic strip as well. I have read some of those Tarzan books and I used to own couple of them, couple of those chapters. They were pretty decent, just like any of those Nancy Drew mysteries, or not mysteries per se, but they were very interesting, very action oriented and very fast. So if you know the story of Tarzan is a orphan that is in the African jungles. His parents are killed by the apes, Kirak, if I'm not wrong, and then Lord Greystoke, as he's born, he's adopted by one of the big apes, and he grows up with their Mangani tribe, and how he takes over as that. So if you the film version of the Tarzans are they emphasize a lot more about his his ability to lord over the animals. But actually, if you see in the comics, he is not really the lord of the animals. He's just one of the apes. He's smarter than the rest, of course, but he's one of the apes. So he's not unlike there was even a film that had come in the 90s or something in India, Tarzan, and the idea therein was he rolls, he can call all the animals at his he has a very unusual sound and they will gather at his call. So that is not how Tarzan of the comics is there. So Tarzan was one of the first one. Then you had Flash Gordon who had come up next. Flash Gordon is another another one of my favorites. This is Flash Gordon, if you care to check. Now Flash Gordon is a very Earthian who has this immense ability. He has a space traveler. His friend is Dr. Zakov who designs a spaceship. So they travel in space and they go to distant planets. There's his girlfriend, love interest is Dale Arden. And the best part about Flash Gordon was his adversary. His adversary was Ming. They belong to a planet, Mongo, and there he's constantly fighting wars with them, and how Ming is all the time, coming out with new schemes and ways to defeat Flash Gordon. And in this whole battle, Flash Gordon is assisted by his friend Prince Barin, who's one of the federation of kingdoms that are there. So there are numerous interesting characters or civilization they talk about. There's Volton, there's Lion Men, there's Hawkmen, and there are different characters. The Frigid, there's a whole land that is frigid. And interestingly, there was a very interesting, I remember Flash Gordon comics had this whole recurring theme of intergalactic intergalactic villains called as Scorpi. And these Scorpi were led by someone called as Baron Dactula, and he's a very ace fighter. So you'd always have these Flash Gordon and Baron Dactula indulging in these dogfights in the sky with their spaceships. It used to be very fun, because if you have a bit of a history back in I'm sure that Baron Dactula was based on a character called as the Red Baron from the Second World War. Now Red Baron was a very famous ace German Nazi fighter who had great great fame and renowned for his abilities in all these dogfights. So that character is based. So this Flash Gordon would give you a sense of those all those World War II kind of a scenario. Now Flash Gordon, it is said that Flash Gordon also inspired Superman, and subsequently Superman was there. Then you had Batman, and in the 30s that they came as Schuster and Siegel had come out with Superman, and Superman Kal-El, he had amazing power from the planet Kryptonite. He landed on Earth, Smallville, and he started living in Metropolis, and so all the his love interests is Lois Lane and Lex Luthor, the amazing villain that is there. So all these fascinating things were there. So what you can see in the early part of the 20th century, you had all these amazing characters, comic heroes and everything in the US and everywhere. Children across Batman and everyone, they were reading. In India, we had the comics came in a bit late, and one of the reasons I think that is unlike our Western cousins and friends, we didn't require superheroes that much, because we tended to worship our superheroes. So I can give you an example. I always say this is while US had Superman, we had Hanuman, right? If you see the tales of Hanuman, if you see the tales of Krishna for that matter, they are very heroic in nature. But unlike others who just who take them and read them and have fun and get inspired, we worship them and we have faith in them, we have belief in them, we have built different systems in them. So our perspective towards heroes and superheroes were very different. It was only in the 60s and the 70s that actually all these comics came to India. And again, I had touched upon the role of Uncle Pai. Uncle Pai had a very interesting role to play in this. So I can just very quickly, I'll tell you the biggest moment in Indian comic industry would be Indrojal Comics, of course. Indrojal Comics, starting in the 60s, it went on till 80s, and hundreds of issues that were there, thousands and millions of copies sold all across India. So what happened actually was, in the 60s, Bennett and Coleman, the Times of India, they had bought these presses, color presses for the first time, and that was basically to publish Illustrated Weekly of India. Now, Illustrated Weekly, if I remember right, as Uncle Pai told me, Illustrated Weekly was a weekly publication. So they were wondering what should they do with these presses that are lying idle for the rest of the time. So what they devised was, let's do one thing. They are already connected with King's Feature Syndicate. Get some of those characters here and start publishing them. So that's how Indrojal basically was born. And the purpose of Indrojal was not merely about, we Indians have this tendency to do things very differently from rest of we try to find some moral lessons and things like that. So when the initial Indrojal comics had come out, they were replete with very interesting features. So there was something called as Around the World with Kunjum Pillai. That was Uncle Pai's thing. So while the comics pages would be there would be quite a few pages of them. There will be quite a few pages dedicated also to that knowledge kind of a thing. So that's how you had the first one that they came out were these Phantom comics that were there. These Phantom is the fabulous character that is there. So if you see, Phantom was the first character that was there. Interestingly, there's an Indian connect to Phantom as well. So when Lee Falk, the creator of the originally how it was created was Phantom the main adversary of Phantom is someone called as a Singh Brotherhood. These are a band of pirates. So when they were adapting this comic to India, they were like, if we have something like a Singh Brotherhood, it might hurt some sentiments. So they change it to the Singha Brotherhood. Now Phantom, according to Lee Falk, is located in a place called as Bengali. Somewhere in Asia they had pictured it, not exactly India. It was changed to Denkali, and the current Phantom that we always have been loving and cherishing about, this one is the 21st Phantom, as it said, in the line of Phantoms. The 20th Phantom was murdered by a pirate named as Rama. And now Rama again would be very difficult to take in India, so they changed it to Ramalu, which is funnily it was also Rama's thing. So you had Phantom here, then you had the amazing Mandrake the Magician. Again this was Lee Falk. Again Mandrake had a very interesting Asian connect, I should say, Asian or Indian connect, because if you remember his father Theron, he has this magical cave in the Himalayas, and he's there, and they have this crystal of magic, and Mandrake is able to connect to that energy, and then he's able to talk about to all these great emperor of the whole universe, Magnon, and he lives in Xanadu, and so fascinating stories which were there, and they had this very mystic yogic connect to them. He'd go into this meditation, and then Theron would connect with him, and they'll exchange messages that type. So that were how Phantom and Mandrake were coming. Flash Gordon was there. To make an honest confession, Flash Gordon has always been my favorite. I don't know for what reason. I really love his adventures because they took you all over the place. Unlike Phantom, which is very restricted to the jungles, or Mandrake would be of course showing off his fascinating home in Xanadu and all, and Lothar by his side. I always liked Flash Gordon for that matter. So Indrajal in the 70s or 80s, they also decided to come up with something very regional. After all, we needed to have India needed its own superhero for that matter. So there's a creator whom I am fortunate to connect, and he's there with me on Facebook as well, Mr. Aabid Surti. He created this character called as Bahadur. Now Bahadur, this is Bahadur. If you see, Bahadur is the son of a dacoit. He is based in a fictional place called as Jaigarh, somewhere in the Chambal valley. So this was in the 80s, 70s, 80s, when dacoity was at its peak. So this was the first, you can say, the rural superhero for that matter, because he based out of a small township. And then Bahadur comes up, he sets up this citizen security force. I remember Inspector Vishal, who has also killed his father Bhairav Singh, and he adopts his son, and then Bahadur grows into this very strong superhuman kind of a thing. He has this dog Chamia, he has his friends Mukhiya and Sukhiya, and if you see the films of the 80s, you get a very Sholay kind of a feel reading these comics. Dacoits, and they're raiding these trains, and they're going on these horses and overnight thing. And then Bahadur is of course very strong. He stings like a cheetah, and he punches like a lion and all those kind of thing. He wears this orange saffron kurta and jeans. So that was the modern part. His love interest is of course Bela, whom he is not shown to be married to. So it was very ahead of its time for that matter. Girlfriend boyfriend kind of a concept back in the 80s. So that is how Bahadur was there, and his persona was developed over the period. He was more westernized. If you see, his kurta was taken over by some Salman Khan kind of a vest that was there, precursor of the Salman Khan vest. So but so he was very much strong, and there were other characters that had come. So Indrajal had other characters that were there. Rip Kirby was there, and then you had Tom Sawyer was there. Then you had Gordon was there. One of the characters that I really didn't like was this one, Garth. I don't know why. I found his comics to be terribly boring in that sense. There was another, so when Aabid Surti left Bahadur, it was taken over by this one, Jagjit Uppal. He was writing the script. So I think so they also decided to, they upgraded, they made Bahadur more modern. He was traveling so they also decided to create a Indian James Bond kind of a figure. So this is Dara. Now Dara is Rana Dara, Dara Sangh, some ex-prince that is there. He lives in the Himalayas and his retreat, and he has this. So his car is also a fancy Mercedes with all those gadgets and everything. So it was a complete rip-off of the James Bond kind of thing. So there were very interesting comics that were there, and the best part that was there. Comics in our times used to come in these collections that were there. So you had these whole edited, bunched together kind of a thing that were put together, and they used to be fascinating. Some of the other things that I would give credit to Indrajal. Indrajal had also come out with something unique in that sense, that they had come out with this thing. They had come out with a comic based on the 1962 India-China war. This was called as the Treasure from No Man's Land. This was very unique. So if you really see, Indrajal was very much ahead of its time, translated in multiple languages, Marathi, everything, Telugu and everywhere. Somehow in the 80s, I think so 87 or something, it's when Indrajal stopped. Indrajal completely stopped its production, and they faced a lot of issues. By that time, you had other characters. Indian comics were also doing good. You had Chasa Chaudhary, of course. You had Lodport. You had Diamond Comics. You had Raj Comics. They had the Nagaraj, and they had Captain Vyom. There were a lot of these characters that were there, but none of them gained the same kind of fame as Indrajal would. As I said, of course, you had these. At that time, you had all these Amar Chitrakathas were also going on. This is one of the earliest Amar Chitrakathas. This is issue number 19. So, if you remember, the first issue was issue 11 of Krishna. This was Hanuman. Then you had Semantic James. You had something very interesting. As I said, just like Indrajal, you had the Battle of Srinagar here, Ram Shastri, and you had these interesting things. I have also been fortunate to read a lot of these Marvel comics and all. These are the graphic somehow, but these graphic comics, as they are called, graphic novels. I'm a bit old school in my taste for comics. So I have been a great fan and follower of artists like Pratap Malik or Ram Vaikar, of course. So Indrajal comics are again they have these very defined blocks kind of a thing. I've never been able to come across these graphic novels that are there. Nowadays you see a lot of these, in the modern day and age, you have comics like Gotham Comics coming in India, Vimanika coming, and you have other bunch of Campfire comics that are coming, and they have designed a lot of these graphic novellas, as they are called. But somehow they don't connect to you in the same way that these old comics and these illustrated things used to. They miss the charm and the magic of these comics. Finally, just as a treat, I would like to show you one comic that has been very fascinating. I don't know how many of you might know this. This is how one of the comics that had come during its time. This was based on Amitabh Bachchan as the superhero Supremo, and he had all these his own secret persona, and he's there and he takes care. He has this hawk that is there, just like he had in Coolie, and there are a lot of elements that are taken from his film and built around. So he plays as Amitabh Bachchan, then as superhero as well. So so those were the wonderful times. The 80s and the 90s were wonderful times. I somehow wish in this day and age, when we have all the means available with us, we have all these facilities of having custom prints and all these things, I wish they could we could recreate that magic. One of the biggest problems that I've seen in the comics today is they are grossly overpriced. So what used to happen in our times was, as even a kid, I could aspire and buy most of these comics myself. I could save it from my pocket money. I could save it here and there, go to all these numerous Raddiwalas that were there, and always find something that I would be able to read. Today's time, there's no possibility of that happening, because these comics are priced at 100, 200 sometimes. They are very costly. You can only buy them at Amazon. So you need that. There's no connect. There's no personal touch that these kids can bring in today. So that is one aspect. I wish there's something of a revolution on that. So that's what is required. Comics and superheroes are very important to us. They're important to us because they inspire us to be better selves of our own self, right? They inspire us to do better in our own life. They inspire us in terms of there's always difficulty and obstacles that we can always overcome. So we need this whole inspiring thing. Of course, we have our magical Mahabharata and Ramayana, but beyond that, we need a whole set of superheroes. We need Bahadur, we need Dara for that matter as well. Phantom is amazing. Flash Gordon would be wonderful. I wish we could go back to that era and bring those things back. So that's about it. I thought being a Friday, that's the best I would share with you today. I'll leave you with this thought, and I'll go back to my comics. This there has been a very benefit for me while creating this lockdown diary, because what has happened to show off these comics collection of mine, I had to bring them out from my cupboard as well, and now I have been I can spend time with them again, go back into my open this portal and go back into my world. So I would love to do that, and I will take your leave for that today. I'll catch you again next week. Till then, stay safe, stay inside, and don't forget to wash your hands. And if you can catch hold of some of these comics, yeah, your day is made. Thank you. Bye bye.